My introduction was like many people's introduction, which was through RuPaul's Drag Race.
The winner of RuPaul's Drag Race receives a one-year supply of Anastasia Beverly Hills Cosmetics and a cash prize of $100,000.
I've watched all the seasons a few times, and I have an interesting relationship with it. I find the art form of drag very interesting, but I also have experienced problems with people assuming I'm a drag queen, not a trans woman. I've had people ask me how long I've done drag, do I do day drag, and I have to sort of awkwardly tell them no. And drag has a bad, or at least a poor reputation with the trans community, sort of not understanding why certain words are not really appropriate, and that being trans and being drag, while they can intersect, aren't the same things. I'm Skylar Vorholt Burbank. I am a second semester senior here at Skidmore College, Anthro History double major. I am a non-binary trans woman. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. Watching season 9 was very interesting because a lot of it for Peppermint was sort of a point for her to reconcile her identity as a trans woman through drag, and that they can intersect, and that doing one does not negate the other. I definitely think drag, it can be complex. Its origins are very complex, and a lot of people don't appreciate the large origins inside of minority communities and as an underground scene that eventually made its way to what could be considered the mainstream. And I definitely think the dominant type of drag right now, portrayed by RuPaul's Drag Race, is the type where you look as close to being as passing as a woman as you can, but we've seen examples on the show where people like club kids or more conceptual artists really play around with the idea of gender. The one thing about Drag Race is it portrays a very specific type of drag and really doesn't allow for much wiggle room. There have been exceptions, but they're few and far between. I do think drag can be very complex, and I do think it is a complex art form. I think it should be represented as such, not just as being one type of performative art where you try and represent a figure of a woman, sort of a caricature, instead of the idea that this is playing with the ideas of gender, and that the lines that sort of society demarcates gender with can be blurred or destroyed, and you can just have fun doing it. I think a lot of it has to do with perceptions of gender. The fact that I'm not a passing trans woman, I don't really know if I want to pass, but there's this sort of underlying perception that if you see someone you identify as male in clothing that is labeled as being for women or that is female, there's a mismatch in your brain that means usually that you will default to it being, say, a performance of some sort. It's being something performative, and that it's not something more innate or more ingrained. I think that trans women can be drag queens. I think that anyone can be a drag queen, a drag king, or just more broadly a drag performer. And I would maybe prefer calling them just all drag performers, because it eliminates sort of a gendered aspect to it that allows for you to play around with gender rather than be stuck into, say, having to represent a more extreme scale hyper-representation of women or men. I think for me more it's just educating people and getting the message out there that gender isn't as simple as you think it is.